I grew up as an NFL fan. And while I've come to like college football, it still doesn't quite match Sunday to me. What would you say is the biggest appeal for being a bigger college football fan than an NFL fan? Laredo, Texas. Thank you, Dexter, for watching. We will convert you in time. But until then, I'll tell you what makes it better for me. I'm not a person who has any problem with the NFL. I'm not like anti-NFL. I don't ever get to watch it because Sundays are our busiest work day during the season. But even before I started working in this industry, I watched college football and loved it way more than NFL. A lot of us from the South, it just comes down to upbringing. A lot of us did not grow up with an NFL team in our backyard. And for those of us from Georgia, it's a it's a complicated relationship with the Falcons. And anyone from Georgia knows exactly what I'm talking about. So if I grew up in Wisconsin, I would eat, sleep, and breathe Green Bay Packer football. I pretty much know that about myself. But I didn't. I grew up in the South. And so in the South, it's a lot different. You grew up in Alabama or Mississippi or Arkansas or Tennessee up until the Oilers relocated. And that's, in sports terms, still a pretty recent happening. It's only been like, it's less than 25 years, or about 25 years they've been in Nashville, the Titans. So you've got like one generation of people that have grown up with that team. Anyway, it's just an upbringing thing. So Saturdays are the crux of your football week. And then Sundays, I watched the NFL when I was growing up. I like the NFL, still do. It wasn't Saturday. So it could just be upbringing. But there's another thing that I used to always get preached to me. And if you're 16 years old, you're going to listen to this and you may laugh, especially if you're a diehard college football fan and you follow the day-to-day workings of the sport. You know, a lot of people like college football because they romanticize the concept of amateurism. Listen to you laughing already. Hold on a second. Let me tell you what that means. Amateurism is exactly what it sounds like, doing something and not really getting paid for it. You're laughing again, and I don't blame you. Amateurism is more concept, more of a woebegone fantasy than it is the reality of college athletics at the highest levels these days. And some would argue, well, it was never fully amateur athletics. Yeah, okay. I think what we're trying to say is left tackles weren't being paid $15 million in college football ever. And so a lot of people, especially if you grew up loving the sport, had it taught to them that when you watch these guys on Saturday, they didn't get drafted to go where they are. They had a choice, and they chose to go play for whoever they play for, and there's a lot more love of the game. You know, there's a lot more just raw passion. They're not playing for the money. They're playing for pride, and they may have money in their future, but right now on this Saturday afternoon, they're still kids. They're still students, and you could scoff at that, but I'm not making fun of it because there is a certain aspect of that that's beautiful. And at least when you lay it out on a piece of paper, there's some purity to it. There's some innocence to it. And, you know, then someone gave me a VHS copy of the movie The Program, and then I learned what college athletics was really like. But still, I think that the amateurism versus professional model, I think that has something to do with it. But look, here's really what it comes down to. If you don't care about either one of those two things, what game day experience means in college football dwarfs what professional football brings to you. And really, that's what I think draws a great big amount of people to the college game. The tailgating scene in college football is out of this world. And I know we got some folks in upstate of New York and in and around the greater Philadelphia area, Kansas City. I'm not telling you guys you don't know what you're doing when it comes to tailgating. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's a big difference being around kids versus being around slightly disgruntled 46-year-old dudes who just had a bad week at work and they really want to take their frustration out in the parking lot on a table. There's just a difference. Both can have fun, but the tailgating scene in college football land is a lot different than NFL land. And also, and producer Jesse made this point, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is there with or without the Eagles on Sundays and anywhere in between. Likewise with Pittsburgh. Likewise with Detroit. Likewise with Cleveland. You don't know about Ann Arbor, Michigan. If you didn't go to school there, you don't really know anything about Ann Arbor. You don't know anything about State College. What do you know about Athens, Georgia, if you didn't associate it with University of Georgia football or Penn State football or Michigan football. And when you go to those towns, it may be tough to get in there sometimes. I do it every week. Trust me, it may be tough to get in there. That's because they don't have big city infrastructure. Everything about the town revolves around the university, and in many cases, it really revolves around the football program. The biggest spectacle, sort of the central location in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, for example, is Bryant-Denny Stadium. You can look at your map, or you can just describe campus to someone, and inevitably, when you're describing campus, it's here's where this place is in relation to our stadium. That's not the way it is in NFL cities, and that's a testament to how big an event a Saturday in the fall is to a college football town as opposed to, outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin, NFL cities. And I think that that has appeal to a lot of people. I'm not saying it's bad to play in a big city. USC does. UCLA does. What I'm saying is I think it appeals to people. The more small-town collegiate experience, I think it appeals to people. Pageantry and tradition, though, this is where it hits home for me. Pageantry and tradition, doing the same things today that in many cases you did in 1958, the same cheers, the same jerseys in many cases, the same pregame and postgame traditions. I don't know. That stuff means something to me. Again, like I said, I watch both, but I love one of them. And it means something to me when I look at college football and I know the game is not restricted and confined to the field. In the NFL, you're pretty much getting everything you need to get inside the lines. In college football, the story only just begins to be told when you're watching what's happening on the field. College football is about so much more than what just happened on 2nd and 4. I mean, if you could travel with me, and many of you are in stadiums every week, but if you could get the vantage point I get, which is the best in the world, you'd know, especially if you were kind of agnostic to our game, and like Dexter, and you just asked a question, what is it about college? You probably just haven't experienced it. If I could take you on tour with me for a year or half a year, maybe just a month, and take you to 4 different venues in 4 weeks, and inevitably when a big game's in town, nothing like it. And also, I think rivalries in college football dwarf the intensity and animosity and over-the-cliff mentality of what you see in pro sports. That's my feel on that. I certainly understand when you get like an Eagles-Giants or a Cowboys-Giants. I understand. It's not pleasant. I get that. I watch it. You're not explaining anything to me I don't know. But you're talking to someone who's been on the field the last 2 years for Michigan, Ohio State. I've probably been on the field for like half a dozen or more Iron Bowls, easily more than half a dozen. It's kind of a scary environment. And it's scary in a way that you look up in the stands and you wonder how members of the opposing team's fan bases can feel safe coming in here. I have vividly recalled for you a time or two the first game I ever went to at Tiger Stadium in Death Valley, LSU, by the way. And it was the first time I saw Nick Saban go into LSU. And I remember walking through the tailgating areas and walking into the venue, in the building, before it opened for the public. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't imagine wearing crimson. Like if I were wearing crimson right now, I would feel so uncomfortable and so worried for my safety because I had someone with me too. I was there covering the game. And so I remember thinking to myself, there's no way that this really exists like I'm feeling right now outside of college football to this degree. Home field advantage means something, especially in these bigger venues. You don't have venues that size in the NFL on Sundays. You don't. They've been outfitted for comfort instead of size. And that's okay. It's a money-making venture. Everything they do on Sundays is to make money. And increasingly, that's how this sport operates. I think a lot of us love aspects of this sport that we would like to cling to it a little bit. It's not always wrong to cling to things that are great. It's not always a bad thing. You know, some things we've done for quite a while in this sport, we've done for quite a while because they're good. It's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it is, but it's not always a bad thing. there's also another thing. I haven't done any research on this. I'm curious. I know the NFL has to have done research on this, but I haven't. I've always been curious how many people are diehard NFL fans that are not a fan of a team, which would have sounded ridiculous in 1997. But with the proliferation of fantasy sports and gambling, I think really fantasy sports more so than gambling, but with the proliferation of both and the legalization of gambling in many states, and eventually it will be all states, I wonder how many people are drawn to rooting for players. This has been the case in the NBA for a while too, but in the NFL, I don't get that sense in college. Yeah, you can bet on college football. College fantasy is not nearly as big as pro fantasy. And as a result, I think when you watch someone who is diehard into it on Saturdays, there is a rooting interest. There's one team out there at least that is their team. And in the NFL, you go to your average sports bar on a Sunday afternoon, you're going to have fans of teams. Make no mistake. But you're going to have a healthy population in there that really couldn't care less who wins. They just want to make sure that Jones over here at wide receiver has more than 37.5 receiving yards before halftime because that's their prop bet. Some of you may even be betting parlays, and shame on you if you are, because that is the devil's tool. Even within sports betting, that parlays are the devil's tool. But I don't get that in college, and that's why I love that in college too. So there's a lot of stuff, Dexter, that people like me love about the college game more so than the pro game. I'm sure there are counter arguments that our brethren on Sundays could make. I've just always been of the opinion, pick whatever you want to watch, and you don't have to restrict yourself to just one thing. Believe it or not, you can do both.
Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.